We're going to provide some context on equity market moves regarding the conflict in the Middle East. Good morning everyone and welcome back to Morning Markets here at True Potential. It's a new week and typically we give an outlook on the data we expect to be published over this week. However, we'll look back somewhat to Friday and the market volatility caused by the outbreak of conflict again between Iran and Israel. Now, as is typical with equity markets, they typically sell off first and think later. So not only did we see equities selling off, we also saw gold sell off and Bitcoin. It was really only oil that went up in price with a material rise over the last week of over 11%. So what is this telling us? Well, the fact that neither bonds nor gold could really rally through the day tells us that the market wasn't focused on a growth shock. It was really more worried potentially around any inflationary impacts via the price of oil. Obviously, Iran could control much of the passage of oil from Saudi Arabia through global freight if it wanted to. It's unlikely to do this because it relies on that global passage for its own goods and its own export of oil. So what we've actually seen is just markets price some disruption to supply chains, however it's likely to be mild. If we fast forward to today, we're already seeing equity markets have clawed back half of what they lost on Friday. And this is showing there isn't really expected to be a long-running growth shock across the region. In fact, hopefully, with what bond yields are telling us, is that the global outlook for growth remains strong. That is, fiscal deficits from governments are supportive for spending and corporate profitability remains healthy. And in fact, we're actually seeing continued revision upwards of earning expectations following the Liberation Day shock back in April. So there isn't likely to be any effect at all on global growth. There will of course be an effect on inflation in July if oil prices are sustained at these levels, particularly for the UK and the US, which have very oil or petrol sensitive inflation baskets. So any remedy for the conflict between Iran and Israel will likely see oil prices fall back at least 10%. And that would unwind most of the shock we've seen in the last week. So the data we will look forward to this week will be UK inflation data for the month of May, which comes on Wednesday. But of course, markets are probably going to be still dominated by what's likely for the next print in inflation. So data probably won't have as much focus as it normally would, given the political events. However, we will update you on Wednesday and of course towards the end of the week based on market moves. So please join us through the week and we'll keep you updated on everything that's going on with equity and global capital markets. Thank you.
This video is not a recommendation or personal financial advice. With investing, your capital is at risk. Investments can fluctuate in value and you may get back less than you invest.